Houston and Duke squaring off. Duke laying 4.5 points, total of 136.5. Jenks, what stands out to you?
Oh, well, it's early. I'll say that. But I'm torn here because I have Houston winning it all, first of all. So I need to get that out there. I want the Cougars to win, and I want it to be their time. They've been so close, so close, so close. I think initially I would probably take Houston in the points here. I mean, this is early in the week, so this will change throughout the week. Do not hold me down. We're seeing, okay, now it's up to Duke laying 5.5 at BetMGM. I understand why everyone is on Duke, and Duke right now is minus money to win the national title. So they are, minus 110, something like that. But I do feel like that Houston Cougars defense is good enough. It's not going to frustrate the Blue Devils like it does a lot of different teams because Duke is so dynamic and they're so very deep. But I do think the Cougars, if there's any team, honestly, maybe outside of Florida, I don't think it's Auburn. I think Houston and Florida can give Duke the most trouble. But I especially think Houston can. If Houston can shoot well, and they are a much better shooting team than we've seen in previous years, that's the difference between this year's Cougars squad and previous Houston teams, where they're always going to play great defense. That's the Kelvin Sampson calling card. But offensively, they've gone cold in other tournaments or haven't been able to sort of match their defensive standard. It's different this year for the Cougars. If I can get Houston at plus 5.5 in a semifinal, a national semifinal, I think that's initially where I would go. I think Duke's going to win, but I do think this is going to be a close game.
Yeah, that line's gone up. So it was 4.5, now 5.5. Clearly some money coming in on Duke. I think the question here is just how good are the Duke Blue Devils on offense? Because when you meet a defense like this, obviously there's not even a comparable defense. Like usually you go on KenPom, you say, hey, what's the best defense that Duke has faced? There is no defense in college basketball that is comparable to the physicality that Houston presents itself. But on the flip side, is there an offensive talent that's comparable to what we see from Cooper Flagg and company that Houston has played? I'm not so sure. So when you have a lottery pick on your team, it feels like maybe it's a cheat code against just about any defense. So I think that's the first thing that stood out to me was this total, 136.5. So if I think that Duke's going to score more points than teams normally do against Houston, because remember, this is not Tennessee that's going against Houston. This is one of the best offenses in the entire country, and nobody slowed down Duke. Even against, the best of competition, they've scored 85 points or more in every single tournament game. Again, this is going to be their biggest challenge. But then the question is, can Houston score against a very good Duke defense? Because as much as we talk about the offense for Duke, their defense has been lights out as well. When you limit Alabama to merely 65 points, what do you think Houston's going to do? So I think that's everybody's concern is, can Houston's offense keep up with Duke's offense? And in the end, I don't think so. I'm leaning towards Duke here, but it is a high number.
Yeah, that's a really good point about Duke's defense. Like, I'm open to any and all conversations, so that's one thing we've been saying, but you make a really good point. There's no question Duke has the better offense here. I mean, not only do they have Cooper Flagg, but they have someone in Concanepo who's going to be an NBA player as well. And we saw how deep they were during the ACC tournament. So I think that's really the big differentiator here is the Duke defense. Can Houston score against a Duke defense that doesn't get the credit that it deserves? So that's a really good point. But 5.5 seems like a big number. Like, I would imagine at some point this goes back to 5, maybe 4.5, but I can't imagine this getting to 6 or 6.5. Then I feel like I would definitely be on Houston.
Yeah, I think it probably stops at 5.5. But I will say this, it's one of the most popular bets that we've seen in the Final Four thus far. Over at BetMGM, it is the most popular bet. Duke laying 4.5, both with the tickets and the money. Jenks, do you believe in fading the public? Like, I think especially in this March Madness where favorites have been an absolute wagon. Like, for the first time in history, favorites went 12-0 in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. So This year, are you saying, if the public's on it, I'm not going to shy away just as much just because it's been such a chalky tournament?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, and it's because this tournament is so different than any other tournament we've seen in so long, right? First time we've seen all number one seeds make the Final Four since 2008. So when you're fading the public in this particular circumstance, are you really fading the public, or are you just following in line with what we've seen the entire tournament experience, which is just, it's been chalk. It's been favorites. And especially these money line parlays, I feel like that's the one area where the sports books have probably struggled, which is these money line favorite parlays keep coming home because the favorites just keep winning. So this is not a special circumstance, but it's unique in that the public has been right because the favorites just keep winning, and we don't normally see this in any NCAA tournament. This has been a real outlier, which is why there's all that talk. Has this something to do with NIL? Is this something we're going to see in the future? We really haven't seen a Cinderella. Are more tournaments going to be like that moving forward? I guess we'll wait and see. But for this tournament itself, it definitely has been something that we haven't seen before in a long time.
Yeah. So here's my next question. Now that it's only 4 teams, sometimes you don't have to play game spreads. You can just play in the futures market. And if you truly think that Duke's going to win this game, and if you don't have any other futures tickets, like Jenks, I know you're on Houston, so obviously maybe you don't want to bet on Duke to win it all, but Duke's minus 110 to win the national championship. If they beat Houston, they're definitely going to be favorites against whoever. Don't you think? Unless something drastically changes. So I feel like that's the bet that I would rather take, is take Duke to win it all, and then maybe you get a better number, because look at this game. They're minus 250 on the money line. So I think you use that strategy as opposed to maybe playing the game. Are there any of these futures that stand out to you? Because people could parachute in right now, and I feel like you could make a good case for all 4 of these teams. As chalky as it's been, now we have the 4 best teams, and all of these teams are very good.
Well, I don't want to go against my Cougars bet at 4-1 because I put some money on them to win it all. But I will say this. I think Florida is a real threat at 3-1. So if you don't like Duke, Florida is a team, I feel like, of all the teams in the tournament, and I didn't give Florida enough credit before the tournament, having watched them and seen them more during the big dance, I feel like they're the one team that is just as balanced as Duke. They have the offensive players. They may not have the names or the blue chippers, but there's no question when you look at Florida's lineup, whether it's Walter Clayton Jr. or whether it's Will Richard or Alex Condon, and they can also rotate players in like Duke can and stay fresh. And they also play very good defense. Duke and Florida are very, very similar teams, and I would love to see what the potential look-ahead line would be if we get Duke and Florida, because whatever it is, it's going to be razor thin.
Yeah, and if you're hoping to bet on Florida's Final Four game, they are 2.5-point favorites over Auburn. And I think the main thing that sticks out to me in that game is watching Auburn last game. I feel like Auburn has the tendency to play very physical. I wouldn't be shocked if they get into foul trouble against Florida. And if it's a game of depth, I think the Gators absolutely are going to win that game. So I think I'm going to be on the Gators and a tight spread in that one in the SEC matchup in the Final Four.